So it's quite a weird emotion now that we've just come back from the last World Cup regatta, and as I unpack my suitcase I had my winner's bib inside it, which means that we ended up winning the World Cup. But I've got to say I think we did it slightly by default because the Germans didn't show up to the last race, and in a way we ended on a low rather than ending on a high, which is a bit of a shame really as it comes into our final preparation for the Olympics. If I look back across the 3 World Cup races, our preparations have been really good going into the first one. Then unfortunately we were a bit hampered when Constantine Louloudis hurt his back, so we had to make a late change. We still raced very well. We moved the riggers around a bit on the boat. Matt Langridge went to stroke, and we went out, and first race was strong, but we knew we could do better. So in the final we decided to really take it on. We led the race, led the Germans for the first time, and although we faded in the second half, I think we definitely felt like we made a really positive step. Came to the second race in Lucerne, and Stan still wasn't better again, unfortunately. We made a change to include a different spare, so we brought in Marcus Bateman, or Red as we call him. And Red's a big, strong bloke. One of our best pullers on the indoor rower. He's definitely a sub 550 guy, probably maybe a 548, 546, 2K guy. So we definitely wanted to accommodate him in the middle of the boat. In order to do that, I moved out to the bow seat, which was a totally new challenge to me. I really enjoyed it, and I have kept enjoying it. It gives me a really good perspective on what's happening in the boat in front of me, and I have a really good feel for the boat speed sitting up at bow. It's almost like I'm in a single scull which is moving incredibly quickly, but I can really feel that speed, much more so than I would in the middle of the boat, where I find it much harder to pick up on what's going on in the boat. So I moved out to bow. We raced in Lucerne, and we stuttered a little bit in the early rounds, but in the final put together the first half that we'd had in Belgrade, added on a third 500 where we were the quickest boat in the race in the third 500, and I felt strong and like we put a lot of pressure on the Germans again. Unfortunately we couldn't keep it up in the last 500, and they still held us off and won. So we were there sitting with 2 silvers and coming into the last World Cup looking to move on. And unfortunately really we just raced in Munich and we didn't manage to build. We didn't really capitalise on what had happened. It was a strange race. The Germans pulled out because they had some injuries. The Dutch pulled out because I think they're having some issues. So we were left with only 4 entries. And I guess the only thing I could put it down to is probably that we were not as up for it as we needed to be. I mean, maybe having the idea going into a race that we thought we were going to win, we relaxed just a little too much, and ultimately we didn't show up on the start. And I remember as we did the warm-up this weekend, the Polish cocks was shouting and beating the sides of the boat. The Australians were all giving it lots of "come on mate" and "this is great" and how up for it they were. And I think we were quite relaxed and cool. But unfortunately, when the starter pressed the button and the green light came on, they took off and we were just a bit slow really. So before we knew what had happened, we were behind the pace of the race and we didn't really ever get back into it. So I guess I could look at it as a tough lesson, but one that's much better to learn now in the World Cup than to wait until the Olympic Games. Because if things go well at the Olympics, we'd hope to start well. But having started well, we know we need to move on for the final, not do what we did here, which was to start well, but then take our eye off the ball a little bit and ultimately not produce our best in the final. And I think we know that's what's got to happen now. We've got to prepare well in the training camps, make sure we arrive at the Olympic Games ready, but then we improve. So our best race ever is on the 1st of August. This Friday we head off to make our final preparations for the Olympic Games. We'll go to Austria first, to Silveretta for our altitude training, about 2 weeks up there, and then we'll come back. I think we have a day at home, and then we go to Portugal for our final couple of weeks, warm weather training, hopefully really nice conditions to really do that sharpening and speed work to get us really ready to race. I think the time in Austria and in the mountains will be very tough. I would imagine we'll be on the indoor rower probably once a day, out on the water trying to get some sessions in, but I know it's going to be cold, I know it's going to be icy, so it'd be really good to have the controlled environment and to do the stuff on the indoor rower. I suspect there'll be mostly long, tough sessions to look to top up our physiology, because during this racing period, maybe the physical bit just drops down, and I know there's nothing like the rower to really push my fitness up and to make sure I'm as strong and fit as I can be. The rowing stuff on the water is great, but it's not as direct, it's not as painful as being on the rowing machine. And in some ways, maybe there's something about me, but I need to feel the pain every day to know that I'm really pushing myself to the edge and getting the best out of myself. So although it'll be tough, I'm looking forward to this trip. There's an impact about going away for these trips on my family. It's coming towards the end of my kids' school year. My daughter's actually in year 6. She's about to leave primary school. And I'm going to miss her last sports day. I'm going to miss her leavers assembly. And that does hurt. That's the sort of thing that for me and my wife, I think it's kind of hardest, really, because those are experiences that I know I won't get to experience again. She won't do that again. And that's the stuff which is hardest. The day-to-day, my wife having to get them out of bed and look after them and do those things, she doesn't mind. And I guess I don't mind missing those things, but I know that the Olympics comes around once every 4 years. This is probably my last chance to do it. So I'm making a bit of a selfish decision that I want to do this because it's the only time in my life I can do it. But I know that the choice I'm making is that I miss out on some of those things they do. I hope they'll forgive me for it. I hope I'll perform better than I did this weekend, because if I'm honest, the thing that hurts me most probably about our poor performance in Munich was hearing about my son Adam playing cricket between 10 and 12, and going back into the pavilion and getting the lady to put it up on the big screen that he could watch his dad compete in the World Cup, and then to see us flounder around and scrape in behind the Poles and the Australians. I know he was pretty sad about that, and that's the sort of thing that hurts me the most.